The Roman Empire in the 1st century CE was a vast and complex political entity, stretching from Britain in the west to the edges of the Middle East in the east, encompassing diverse cultures, economies, and military forces. Despite its outward grandeur, it was plagued by internal turmoil, particularly in matters of succession. The rule of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, beginning with Augustus, had established the empire's foundations, but by the time of Emperor Nero, Rome was in crisis. Nero's reign, which lasted from 54 to 68 CE, was marked by extravagance, political purges, and a growing alienation from the Senate and the military. His excesses drained the state's resources, leading to discontent among both the aristocracy and the common people. As opposition to Nero grew, the political structure of Rome began to fracture. When the Senate finally declared him a public enemy, Nero took his own life, leaving behind a leadership vacuum that plunged the empire into chaos. What followed was the infamous Year of the Four Emperors, 69 CE, a period of violent civil war and rapid power struggles. After Nero's death, Galba, a respected general, was declared emperor, but his rule was short-lived due to his inability to secure support from key factions in the military. His harsh financial policies and disregard for the Praetorian Guard led to his assassination, making way for Otho, who seized power but was soon challenged by Vitellius, a general from the Rhine legions. Vitellius marched on Rome, defeated Otho, and briefly ruled, but his administration was weak, corrupt, and unpopular. Meanwhile, in the eastern provinces, another power was rising. Vespasian, a seasoned general who had been leading Rome's military efforts in Judea, emerged as a strong contender for the throne. His rise was not merely another attempt at seizing power, it was a crucial turning point for Rome. Unlike his predecessors in that chaotic year, Vespasian had several advantages. He was not a product of Rome's aristocracy but rather a soldier who had risen through the ranks based on merit. His leadership in the Jewish War demonstrated his strategic acumen and ability to maintain order in volatile regions. More importantly, he commanded the loyalty of the legions stationed in the east, including those in Judea, Syria, and Egypt. With the backing of these powerful forces, he declared himself emperor and initiated a decisive campaign against Vitellius. His supporters, particularly his general Antonius Primus, swiftly moved against Vitellius' forces in Italy, culminating in the capture of Rome and the brutal execution of Vitellius. By the end of 69 CE, Vespasian had secured his position as emperor, bringing an end to the civil war. Vespasian's ascent to power was not just another change in leadership, it marked the beginning of a new era for Rome. He was a stark contrast to the emperors who had preceded him. Where Nero had indulged in lavish displays of wealth and artistic pursuits, Vespasian was pragmatic and disciplined. Where the emperors of the Year of the Four Emperors had been short-sighted and politically weak, he was strategic and methodical. His rule was defined by stability, fiscal responsibility, and the consolidation of imperial power. Unlike Nero, who drained Rome's treasury, Vespasian introduced financial reforms that replenished the state's wealth, ensuring that the empire could sustain its vast military and infrastructure. He also sought to restore the Senate's role in governance, reversing some of the tensions that had defined Nero's final years. One of the most significant aspects of Vespasian's rule was his effort to reshape Rome both politically and physically. He launched a series of public works projects, including the construction of the Colosseum, which became one of the most enduring symbols of Roman engineering and culture. These projects not only improved the city's infrastructure but also helped solidify his legitimacy by demonstrating his commitment to the Roman people. At the same time, he maintained a firm grip on power, ensuring that opposition to his rule was swiftly dealt with. He rewarded loyal allies and promoted competent administrators, stabilizing the imperial bureaucracy that had been in disarray. Vespasian's leadership was transformative in that it established a precedent for emperors who were not from the old aristocratic class. His rise signaled the beginning of the Flavian dynasty, which would govern Rome for nearly 3 decades. His sons, Titus and Domitian, would succeed him, reinforcing the idea of dynastic continuity in the empire. His rule also reinforced the importance of military backing in securing and maintaining the imperial throne. The lesson of his rise was clear: In the volatile politics of Rome, an emperor needed not only legitimacy in the eyes of the Senate and people but also the unwavering loyalty of the legions. In many ways, Vespasian was the emperor Rome needed after years of instability. He was not a visionary in the way that Augustus had been, nor was he a conqueror in the mold of Julius Caesar. Instead, he was a pragmatic leader who understood the importance of governance, order, and economic stability. His ability to balance military power with administrative efficiency allowed Rome to recover from one of its most turbulent periods. The transformation he led ensured that the empire would endure for centuries to come. His rise from a common soldier to emperor was unprecedented, and his reign redefined what it meant to be a ruler of Rome. Where previous emperors had relied on their noble lineage or political maneuvering, Vespasian demonstrated that practical leadership, military discipline, and economic foresight were just as crucial to maintaining control of the empire. His rule set the foundation for future emperors who prioritized governance over personal indulgence, and his legacy as a stabilizing force in Rome's history remains one of the most significant in the annals of the empire. Titus Flavius Vespasianus, later known as Emperor Vespasian, was born in 9C in the small town of Fallacrina, Italy. Unlike many of the emperors who preceded him, he did not come from an illustrious patrician lineage but rather from a modest equestrian family. His father, Titus Flavius Sabinus, was a tax collector and banker, a position that provided financial stability but lacked the prestige of senatorial rank. His mother, Vespasia Palla, came from a family of higher social standing, as her father had served as a centurion and her brother had attained senatorial rank. This maternal connection may have helped the young Vespasian gain access to opportunities that otherwise might have been out of reach for someone of his background. The Flavian family was not historically prominent, but it was ambitious. Unlike the old aristocratic families of Rome, which had deep political roots stretching back to the Republic, the Flavians were part of the new elite rising in the early days of the empire. The transition from republic to empire under Augustus had allowed for the elevation of men from outside the traditional ruling class, particularly those with military competence. This shift created an environment where capable individuals from less distinguished backgrounds could climb the ranks if they demonstrated loyalty and effectiveness in governance or warfare. Vespasian's father had achieved moderate success, but it was Vespasian himself who would transform the family's standing forever. Vespasian grew up in an era dominated by the Julio-Claudian dynasty, a period when the first emperors of Rome were consolidating their rule. During his youth, Augustus' successor, Tiberius, ruled with a firm but increasingly reclusive grip, setting a precedent for the often volatile nature of imperial politics. These early experiences likely shaped Vespasian's understanding of power, loyalty, and the importance of military strength. Though his family was not at the center of Rome's political life, they were close enough to understand the mechanisms of advancement in an empire where military success was often the surest path to prominence. Like most young men of his class, Vespasian received a standard Roman education, focusing on rhetoric, philosophy, and governance. His early studies prepared him for a career in public life, though it is said that he was not particularly fond of academic pursuits. His mother reportedly chastised him for his lack of enthusiasm for politics and learning, encouraging him to apply himself more seriously to the responsibilities that would come with adulthood. Nevertheless, Vespasian was practical, disciplined, and determined, qualities that would serve him well in his future military and political career. His first significant steps in public life came when he entered military service, a path that offered both opportunities for advancement and the chance to build a reputation. His early military postings were in Thrace and Germany, where he gained first-hand experience in commanding troops and dealing with the complexities of frontier warfare. These provinces were among the most militarized regions of the empire, with Rome constantly engaged in skirmishes with local tribes and seeking to maintain stability along its borders. Serving in these areas gave Vespasian insight into the logistical challenges of military campaigns, the management of soldiers, and the strategic importance of discipline. One of his earliest noteworthy assignments was in Thrace, where he likely served as a military tribune, an officer responsible for leading a cohort of soldiers. The role required both tactical skill and administrative ability, as tribunes were involved in both battlefield leadership and managing the daily affairs of their units. This experience helped him develop an understanding of how to maintain order among troops, a skill that would prove invaluable in his later campaigns. His time in Germany further reinforced these lessons, as the region was a hotspot for revolts and conflicts between Roman forces and local tribes. Vespasian's military service earned him recognition, and his career advanced steadily. By the time Emperor Claudius ascended the throne in 41 CE, Vespasian was positioned to take on more significant responsibilities. Claudius, unlike his predecessors, was known for his reliance on competent administrators and generals rather than favoring only the old aristocracy. This shift worked in Vespasian's favor, allowing him to rise based on merit rather than noble lineage. In 43 CE, when Claudius launched the Roman conquest of Britain, Vespasian was given a prominent command under Aulus Plautius, the general leading the invasion. The conquest of Britain was one of the most ambitious military campaigns of the Julio-Claudian era, as the island had long remained outside Rome's direct control. While Julius Caesar had conducted earlier expeditions to Britain, it was under Claudius that Rome sought to fully integrate it into the empire. Vespasian played a critical role in the campaign, leading the Legio II Augusta, one of the 4 legions assigned to the invasion. His leadership was instrumental in securing key victories against the native British tribes, particularly in the southwest of the island. During the campaign, Vespasian's forces reportedly fought in 30 battles, subdued multiple tribes, and captured at least 20 fortified settlements. His ability to command troops effectively, adapt to the challenges of unfamiliar terrain, and secure Roman control over new territories demonstrated his tactical skill. The success of the invasion further established his reputation as a capable and reliable military leader. This campaign not only expanded Rome's territorial reach but also solidified Vespasian's standing as one of Claudius' most trusted generals. Following his achievements in Britain, Vespasian returned to Rome and was rewarded with high political office. He was granted triumphal honors and appointed as a consul, one of the highest positions in Roman government. This was a significant milestone, as it marked his transition from a purely military figure to a political leader. His elevation to the consulship signified his integration into Rome's ruling class and confirmed that he was now among the empire's elite. However, despite this rise in status, he remained known for his no-nonsense, practical demeanor. Unlike many of the aristocrats who occupied similar positions, Vespasian was not excessively concerned with luxury or pretension. He was a soldier first and foremost, a reputation that endeared him to both the army and the common people. Although his consulship granted him political influence, Vespasian did not immediately seek further power. He maintained a relatively low profile during the later years of Claudius' reign and the early rule of Nero. His reluctance to engage in the political intrigues of Rome may have been a calculated decision, as the imperial court was rife with conspiracies, betrayals, and shifting alliances. Nero, who became emperor in 54 CE, was notoriously unpredictable and vindictive, eliminating perceived threats with little hesitation. Many prominent figures who had enjoyed favor under Claudius found themselves exiled or executed during Nero's reign. Vespasian, perhaps recognizing the dangers of being too close to the imperial court, chose instead to focus on his administrative duties and military responsibilities. Despite his caution, Vespasian's experience and competence meant that he could not be entirely ignored. By the mid-60s CE, Rome faced increasing instability. Nero's extravagant spending had drained the empire's treasury, and his erratic behavior alienated both the Senate and the military. In 66 CE, a major revolt broke out in Judea, a province that had long been a source of tension due to religious and cultural conflicts between the Jewish population and Roman authorities. Nero needed a general who could suppress the rebellion efficiently, and Vespasian was chosen for the task. His appointment as commander of the Roman forces in Judea marked the beginning of the most defining chapter of his career. The Jewish War would not only showcase his military skill but also position him as a key player in the events that would lead to his eventual rise to the throne. When he departed for the East, few could have predicted that this seasoned but politically cautious general would soon become emperor. However, his years of military experience, administrative ability, and reputation for discipline had already laid the foundation for what was to come. Vespasian's early life and career were shaped by his ability to navigate the complexities of Roman politics while maintaining his focus on practical governance and military efficiency. Unlike many of his contemporaries, he was not driven by excessive ambition or the desire for immediate power. Instead, he built his career steadily, gaining the respect of his soldiers, his superiors, and, eventually, the Roman people. His rise from a modest equestrian family to one of Rome's most capable generals was a testament to his resilience and competence. By the time he took command in Judea, he had already proven himself in battle, in governance, and in the delicate balance of political survival. These experiences would ultimately prepare him for the greatest challenge of all, restoring stability to an empire on the brink of collapse. The Jewish War, which erupted in 66 CE, was a defining moment in Vespasian's career, propelling him from a respected but politically cautious general into a key figure in Roman history. The roots of the rebellion lay in long-standing tensions between the Jewish population and Roman authorities, exacerbated by religious disputes, heavy taxation, and administrative corruption. Judea had been a province under Roman control since 6 CE, but relations between the Jewish people and their imperial overlords had always been fraught with conflict. Many Jews resented Roman rule, particularly the interference in their religious practices and the presence of Roman troops in their sacred cities. This resentment turned into open revolt when a combination of economic hardships and Roman provocations led to a widespread uprising. In 66 CE, a Roman governor named Gessius Florus exacerbated the situation by plundering the temple treasury in Jerusalem, claiming the funds were owed to the empire. This act enraged the Jewish population, sparking violent resistance. The rebels, emboldened by initial victories, managed to expel Roman forces from Jerusalem, an event that shocked the imperial government in Rome. The loss of such a crucial city in a rebellious province was an unacceptable challenge to Roman authority. Nero, the reigning emperor, needed a capable and experienced general to suppress the rebellion and restore order. Vespasian, having built a reputation as a disciplined and effective military leader during the conquest of Britain and his earlier service in Rome's frontier regions, was chosen for the task. When Vespasian arrived in Judea in 67 CE, he faced a challenging situation. The province was in chaos, with different Jewish factions vying for control. Some groups were willing to negotiate, while others were determined to resist Roman rule to the death. Vespasian's approach was methodical and pragmatic. He did not rush into battle recklessly. Instead, he took the time to assess the situation, secure supply lines, and gather intelligence. His first priority was to isolate the rebels and cut off their support networks. He began his campaign by targeting smaller rebel strongholds, weakening their ability to coordinate large-scale resistance. One of the most significant battles of the campaign was the Siege of Jotapata, a heavily fortified city that had become a major center of resistance. The city was defended by Jewish forces under the command of Josephus, a historian and military leader who would later become one of the most important sources of information on the war. Vespasian's army surrounded Jotapata and launched a relentless assault. The siege lasted for weeks, with the Romans employing siege engines, battering rams, and psychological warfare to wear down the defenders. Despite fierce resistance, the city eventually fell, and thousands of its inhabitants were killed or enslaved. Josephus was captured but spared, later becoming an advisor to Vespasian and documenting the war in his writings. Vespasian's success in Jotapata demonstrated his strategic patience and ability to conduct prolonged military operations. Rather than seeking a decisive, high-risk battle, he preferred a systematic approach, isolating strongholds, using local intelligence, and gradually tightening his grip on the province. He also employed diplomacy where possible, persuading some Jewish factions to surrender rather than face destruction. This blend of military force and political maneuvering allowed him to make steady progress in suppressing the revolt. As Vespasian was methodically reclaiming Judea for Rome, events in the empire took a dramatic turn. In 68 CE, Nero's increasingly erratic rule came to an end when he was declared a public enemy by the Senate and forced to commit suicide. his death plunged the empire into chaos, triggering a civil war known as the Year of the Four Emperors. With Nero gone, the question of succession became a battlefield of its own. The Roman legions, traditionally loyal to their generals, played a crucial role in determining the next ruler. Over the course of a single year, 3 different men, Galba, Otho, and Vitellius, rose and fell in quick succession, each failing to secure lasting control over the empire. Initially, Vespasian remained focused on his military campaign in Judea, avoiding direct involvement in the political turmoil of Rome. However, as the civil war escalated, he realized that his position as commander of the Eastern legions gave him a unique opportunity. The troops under his command, particularly those stationed in Egypt and Syria, were among the most experienced and disciplined in the empire. They also controlled key grain supplies from Egypt, a vital resource for Rome. As Galba was assassinated and Otho and Vitellius struggled for power, Vespasian's supporters began to urge him to claim the throne. His troops, recognizing his leadership qualities, declared their loyalty to him. Unlike previous contenders for the throne, Vespasian had a strong foundation of military support and a proven track record as a capable administrator and strategist. With the backing of the Eastern legions, he moved cautiously but decisively. His first step was to secure Egypt, ensuring control over its grain supply. This move was a masterstroke, as it gave him leverage over Rome itself. Without Egyptian grain, the capital would face severe food shortages. Meanwhile, his allies in the west, including General Antonius Primus, launched an offensive against Vitellius, who had taken power in Rome. The decisive battle took place at Cremona, where Vitellius' forces were defeated, paving the way for Vespasian's march to the capital. By the end of 69 CE, Vespasian had emerged as the clear victor in the civil war. He was formally recognized as emperor by the Senate, bringing an end to a year of instability and uncertainty. Vespasian's rise to power was remarkable not only for his military achievements but also for the way he conducted himself throughout the crisis. Unlike many of his predecessors, he did not rely on noble birth or extravagant displays of wealth to legitimize his rule. Instead, he built his reputation on competence, discipline, and the loyalty of his soldiers. His ascent marked a turning point in Roman history, signaling the end of the Julio-Claudian dynasty and the beginning of the Flavian era. Where previous emperors had ruled with excess and unpredictability, Vespasian promised stability, pragmatism, and a return to disciplined governance. His first priority as emperor was to consolidate his rule and restore order. The civil war had left Rome divided, and many provinces were still recovering from the upheaval. He focused on rebuilding the empire's finances, which had been drained by Nero's extravagant spending and the costs of the war. Unlike Nero, who had burdened the empire with excessive taxation to fund his lavish projects, Vespasian implemented economic reforms that prioritized stability over spectacle. He also worked to restore the authority of the Senate and other governing institutions, recognizing that long-term stability required more than just military power. Another key aspect of his rule was his approach to the military. He understood that the loyalty of the legions had been a decisive factor in his rise to power, and he took steps to ensure their continued support. However, he also recognized the dangers of unchecked military influence in politics. To prevent future civil wars, he carefully managed the distribution of military commands, ensuring that no single general could amass too much power. His policies in this regard laid the groundwork for a more stable imperial system. In Judea, the war was still ongoing, but Vespasian entrusted its completion to his son, Titus. This decision was both a strategic and political move, as it allowed Vespasian to focus on ruling the empire while giving Titus an opportunity to prove himself as a military leader. Under Titus' command, Jerusalem was besieged and eventually captured in 70 CE, bringing the Jewish war to an end. The destruction of the Second Temple was a defining moment in Jewish history, while for Rome, it was a symbol of imperial might. The victory further solidified the Flavian dynasty's legitimacy, with Titus emerging as his father's natural successor. Vespasian's rise from a relatively obscure general to emperor of Rome was a testament to his adaptability, resilience, and understanding of power. He had navigated the complexities of Roman politics, survived the chaos of civil war, and restored order to an empire on the brink of collapse. His reign would be characterized by practical governance, economic recovery, and military stability. Unlike Nero, who had squandered Rome's resources on personal indulgences, Vespasian prioritized the needs of the state, ensuring that the empire remained strong and secure. His legacy would endure beyond his own reign, as the Flavian dynasty he established would continue under his sons, Titus and Domitian. In many ways, his leadership marked a transition from the extravagance of the Julio-Claudian emperors to a more disciplined and pragmatic approach to governance. By the time he passed away in 79 CE, he had not only secured his own place in history but had also set a precedent for future rulers who would prioritize stability over excess, competence over spectacle, and governance over personal ambition. Vespasian's march to power was a decisive moment in Roman history, marking the end of the turbulent year of the four emperors. His ascent was not merely a consequence of ambition but a necessity born out of the chaos that had gripped the empire since Nero's fall. As a seasoned general with a pragmatic approach to leadership, Vespasian had already established a strong foundation of support in the eastern provinces, particularly in Judea, Syria, and Egypt. These regions, critical to the economic and military stability of the empire, became the bedrock of his bid for the throne. Unlike his predecessors, who relied on the fickle support of the Praetorian Guard or the Senate's unstable political maneuvering, Vespasian understood that true power rested in the loyalty of the legions. The eastern provinces had long been crucial to Rome's administration, and Vespasian's control over them gave him a significant advantage over his rivals. The legions stationed there had been hardened by years of warfare, particularly in Judea, where the Jewish revolt had tested their endurance and discipline. Moreover, the region's economic strength, particularly Egypt's grain supply, provided Vespasian with a strategic advantage. Whoever controlled Egypt controlled the food supply of Rome itself, making it an essential asset in his march to power. However, Vespasian was not in Rome when the crisis unfolded. Instead, his rise was facilitated by a network of allies, the most important of whom was Gaius Licinius Mucianus, the governor of Syria. Unlike Vespasian, who was a soldier at heart, Mucianus was a politician with deep connections in Rome. Initially, the two men had been rivals, each wary of the other's influence in the east. But as the situation in Rome deteriorated, they recognized that an alliance was in their mutual interest. Mucianus provided political strategy and access to elite circles, while Vespasian commanded the loyalty of the legions. Together, they formed a formidable partnership. Another key figure in this power struggle was Antonius Primus, a general stationed in the western provinces who played a decisive role in securing Vespasian's claim to the throne. While Mucianus focused on political maneuvering and consolidating power in the east, Antonius took direct military action against Vespasian's primary rival, the reigning emperor Vitellius. Though Vitellius had managed to seize power earlier in the year, his rule was tenuous, dependent on the loyalty of the German legions and the remnants of the Praetorian Guard. He lacked the broad-based support needed to maintain control over an empire in turmoil. In the summer of 69 CE, Vespasian's troops formally declared him emperor. This declaration was not merely a symbolic gesture, it signified that the most powerful legions in the empire had chosen their ruler. With this backing, Vespasian could confidently move against Vitellius. However, rather than marching on Rome himself, he entrusted the campaign to Antonius Primus, who led the Flavian forces into Italy. Mucianus, meanwhile, moved westward to consolidate power in the eastern provinces and prepare for the eventual transition of authority in Rome. As Antonius advanced through Italy, his forces clashed with those loyal to Vitellius in a series of brutal encounters. The decisive battle took place at Cremona, where the Flavian legions met the Vitellian army in a ferocious confrontation. Unlike previous engagements, which had often been swift and decisive, this battle dragged on, marked by intense street fighting and prolonged skirmishes. Ultimately, Antonius' forces emerged victorious, dealing a devastating blow to Vitellius' remaining support. The defeat at Cremona signaled the end of Vitellius' reign, but his downfall was far from immediate. Even after his military defeat, Vitellius attempted to cling to power in Rome. He barricaded himself in the imperial palace, hoping for a last-minute reversal of fortune. However, his remaining supporters quickly abandoned him as Flavian forces closed in on the capital. When Antonius' army entered Rome, the city erupted in chaos. Riots broke out, and rival factions fought in the streets. The Praetorian Guard, once loyal to Vitellius, disintegrated as soldiers switched allegiances or fled in the face of overwhelming opposition. Vitellius' final moments were marked by desperation and humiliation. He attempted to negotiate his surrender, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. As Flavian forces stormed the palace, he was dragged out and paraded through the streets. According to historical accounts, he was subjected to public ridicule before being executed in the Forum. His body was then cast into the Tiber, a grim reminder of the brutality of Roman power struggles. With Vitellius dead, Vespasian's position as emperor was secured, but his work was far from over. The city of Rome was in disarray, and the empire remained divided. His first priority was to consolidate power, ensuring that his rule would not be challenged as his predecessors had been. To achieve this, he implemented a careful balance of rewards and retributions. His supporters were granted positions of influence, while those who had opposed him faced harsh consequences. One of the most controversial aspects of Vespasian's consolidation of power was the series of proscriptions that followed his victory. Proscriptions had long been a tool of Roman politics, used to eliminate rivals and seize their wealth. However, Vespasian was more pragmatic than his predecessors. While he punished key supporters of Vitellius, he also sought to stabilize the empire by limiting the scale of retribution. Instead of executing all his enemies, he allowed many to go into exile or simply stripped them of their political influence. This approach helped him avoid the endless cycle of bloodshed that had characterized previous regime changes. At the same time, he rewarded those who had been instrumental in his rise to power. Mucianus was given a prominent role in the new administration, overseeing much of the empire's political restructuring. Antonius Primus, though crucial in securing victory, was treated with more caution. His aggressive military tactics had won the war, but Vespasian was wary of ambitious generals who might one day challenge his authority. While he was rewarded for his service, he was gradually sidelined in political affairs. Vespasian also took steps to restore financial stability to the empire. Nero's extravagant spending and the civil war had left Rome's treasury nearly empty. To replenish state funds, Vespasian implemented a series of economic reforms, including new taxes and tighter control over imperial expenditures. His pragmatic approach to finance earned him a reputation as a frugal but effective ruler, in stark contrast to the excesses of his predecessors. Another crucial aspect of his consolidation of power was his relationship with the Senate. Although the Senate had lost much of its real authority by this time, it still played a symbolic role in legitimizing an emperor's rule. Vespasian sought to restore some dignity to the institution, allowing senators a greater role in governance while maintaining firm control over key decisions. His ability to balance autocratic rule with senatorial cooperation helped him establish a stable and lasting regime. Despite the challenges he faced, Vespasian's rise to power marked the beginning of a new era for Rome. His leadership brought stability after years of turmoil, and his practical approach to governance set a precedent for future rulers. Unlike many of his predecessors, who had relied on spectacle and extravagance to maintain their rule, Vespasian prioritized efficiency and order. His ascent was not simply the result of military might but of careful strategy, calculated alliances, and an understanding of the political landscape. By the time he entered Rome as its undisputed ruler, he had already proven himself as more than just a general. He was a leader who understood the complexities of power and knew how to wield it effectively. His ability to navigate both military and political challenges ensured that his rule would not be a fleeting one. Instead, he laid the foundation for the Flavian dynasty, ensuring that his legacy would endure long after his time. His journey from the battlefields of Judea to the imperial throne of Rome was a testament to his adaptability and resilience. He had faced rebellion, civil war, and political intrigue, yet he emerged victorious not through sheer force alone, but through a combination of strategic alliances, calculated risks, and an unwavering commitment to restoring order. his reign would go on to reshape the Roman Empire, proving that the qualities of a great general could also make for a great emperor. Vespasian's reign as emperor marked a turning point for the Roman Empire, bringing stability after years of turmoil and excess. He assumed power at a time when Rome was reeling from Nero's extravagant rule and the subsequent chaos of the Year of the Four Emperors. His leadership was defined by pragmatism, discipline, and a deep understanding of governance, qualities that allowed him to rebuild the empire from both a political and economic standpoint. Unlike his predecessors, who sought to rule through spectacle or brute force, Vespasian took a methodical approach, focusing on restoring order, reviving the economy, and investing in public works that would leave a lasting impact. One of his first priorities was stabilizing the political landscape. The Senate, once a powerful governing body, had been marginalized under previous emperors, reduced to a largely symbolic role. Though the days of true senatorial control over Rome were long gone, Vespasian understood the importance of appearing to restore the Senate's authority. He did not seek to dismantle the imperial system, but he worked to repair relations between the Senate and the emperor, granting senators greater involvement in governance while maintaining his firm grip on decision-making. This move not only secured his legitimacy but also helped prevent further unrest by creating the illusion of shared power. The military, too, needed to be reorganized. The civil wars had shown that legions were often the true kingmakers, and without their loyalty, no emperor could hope to rule for long. Vespasian took steps to ensure that the soldiers who had fought for him were properly rewarded, granting them land, bonuses, and positions of influence. At the same time, he took measures to prevent any one faction from becoming too powerful, restructuring the legions in a way that ensured their allegiance remained divided between the empire rather than any individual general. This restructuring helped bring an end to the military anarchy that had plagued Rome, reinforcing stability across the provinces. Another key aspect of his rule was the establishment of the Flavian dynasty. While Rome had seen dynastic rule before, the fall of Nero had called into question whether a single family could truly maintain control over the empire. Vespasian worked to solidify the Flavians as a legitimate ruling house, positioning his sons, Titus and Domitian, as his successors. By ensuring a smooth transition of power, he aimed to prevent another destructive power struggle like the one that had followed Nero's death. His efforts in this regard proved successful, as the Flavian dynasty would rule Rome for nearly 3 decades after his death. One of the most pressing challenges Vespasian faced was the dire state of Rome's economy. Nero had drained the imperial treasury with his lavish spending, leaving the empire on the verge of financial ruin. Vespasian, known for his frugality, immediately took steps to restore economic stability. He imposed strict fiscal policies, cutting unnecessary expenditures and ensuring that state funds were directed toward practical purposes. Unlike Nero, who had spent extravagantly on personal luxuries, Vespasian focused on infrastructure, military upkeep, and economic revitalization. To generate revenue, he introduced a series of new taxes, some of which became infamous. One such tax, levied on urine collection, became particularly well known. In Rome, urine was collected from public latrines and used for various industrial purposes, such as tanning leather and laundering clothes. Seeing an opportunity to profit from this practice, Vespasian implemented a tax on those who bought urine for commercial use. This decision was met with criticism, but when his son Titus objected, Vespasian famously held a coin to his nose and remarked, "Money does not stink." This pragmatic approach to taxation exemplified his no-nonsense attitude toward economic management. Beyond taxation, Vespasian worked to revitalize trade and agriculture, which had suffered due to the instability of previous years. He encouraged the expansion of agricultural estates, ensuring that Rome's food supply remained stable. Additionally, he promoted trade with the provinces, recognizing that economic prosperity depended on a well-functioning network of commerce. By securing Rome's grain supply from Egypt and ensuring that key trade routes remained open, he helped stabilize prices and prevent the shortages that had plagued the empire in the past. One of Vespasian's most enduring legacies was his investment in public works. He recognized that a strong and well-maintained infrastructure was essential for both governance and public morale. One of his most famous projects was the construction of the Flavian Amphitheater, later known as the Colosseum. Built on the site of Nero's extravagant Domus Aurea, the Colosseum was both a practical entertainment venue and a symbolic statement. By repurposing the land that Nero had once used for his own pleasure, Vespasian demonstrated that his rule was one of public service rather than self-indulgence. The Colosseum, which would go on to host gladiatorial games and public spectacles, became a lasting monument to the Flavian dynasty. Beyond the Colosseum, Vespasian oversaw numerous other construction projects. He expanded Rome's road networks, ensuring that communication and trade between provinces remained efficient. He also invested in aqueducts, improving the city's water supply and ensuring that its growing population had access to clean drinking water. Urban renewal efforts included restoring buildings damaged during the civil wars and improving public spaces to accommodate the needs of citizens. Vespasian's commitment to infrastructure extended beyond Rome itself. He invested in provincial cities, recognizing that the strength of the empire depended on more than just the capital. By funding construction projects in key provincial centers, he reinforced Rome's presence throughout the empire and ensured that these regions remained loyal to the central government. Culturally, Vespasian was a patron of the arts and literature, though his approach was markedly different from that of Nero. Where Nero had sought personal glory through artistic endeavors, Vespasian supported works that reinforced Rome's traditions and values. He encouraged historians to document the events of his reign, ensuring that his legacy was recorded for future generations. Notably, the historian Tacitus, who would later write detailed accounts of this period, began his career during Vespasian's rule. Despite his many successes, Vespasian's reign was not without challenges. He faced resistance from certain factions within the Senate, as well as occasional uprisings in the provinces. However, his firm but pragmatic approach to governance allowed him to navigate these difficulties without resorting to excessive brutality. He was known for his wit and sense of humor, often using clever remarks to defuse tensions and disarm his critics. This ability to maintain control without alienating his subjects contributed to the longevity of his rule. By the time of his death in 79 CE, Vespasian had achieved what few Roman emperors had: a peaceful and stable transition of power. His son Titus succeeded him without major opposition, a testament to the strength of the Flavian dynasty that he had established. Though his reign lasted only a decade, its impact was profound. He had taken an empire on the brink of collapse and restored it to stability, setting the stage for a period of relative prosperity. His legacy endured not only through the physical monuments he left behind but also through the principles of governance he embodied. He proved that an emperor need not be extravagant or tyrannical to maintain control. Instead, practical leadership, economic discipline, and investment in public welfare could form the foundation of a strong and lasting rule. His reign demonstrated that Rome could thrive under a ruler who prioritized stability over spectacle, laying the groundwork for the continued success of the empire in the years to come. Even after his death, his influence was felt throughout Rome. The Colosseum continued to stand as a testament to his vision. The roads and aqueducts he built ensured the empire's continued prosperity, and the Flavian dynasty he established carried his legacy forward. In the grand history of Rome, Vespasian may not have been the most glamorous emperor, but he was undoubtedly one of its most effective. His ability to rebuild and reform, rather than merely rule, set him apart from many of his predecessors. Through his leadership, he transformed Rome from a city teetering on the edge of collapse into a stable and thriving imperial capital, securing his place as one of the empire's great rulers. Vespasian's reign as emperor was not only marked by domestic reforms but also by his firm and strategic approach to military and foreign policy. Having risen to power through his military acumen, he understood that Rome's strength depended on securing its frontiers, maintaining stability in the provinces, and ensuring that no external force threatened the empire's dominance. His policies reflected a balance between military pragmatism and calculated expansion, focusing on fortifying Rome's borders rather than embarking on reckless conquests. At the same time, he oversaw the final and most devastating phase of the Jewish War, a conflict that not only shaped the fate of Judea but also became a defining event in Roman history. One of Vespasian's foremost priorities was to strengthen the empire's northern borders. The regions of Britain and Germany remained volatile, with frequent skirmishes between Roman legions and various tribal groups. Since the conquest of Britain under Emperor Claudius, maintaining control over the territory had been a challenge, as the local tribes were resistant to Roman rule. Vespasian, having played a role in the initial conquest, recognized the need to reinforce Rome's presence in the region. He ensured that the Roman military in Britain remained well-supplied and strategically positioned, supporting the continued expansion into the northern territories. His commanders worked to consolidate Roman rule by constructing forts, roads, and military settlements that allowed for more efficient control over the land. In Germany, the Rhine and Danube frontiers had long been points of contention between Rome and the various Germanic tribes. The unrest that had followed Nero's downfall had weakened Rome's grip on these crucial regions, and Vespasian took swift action to restore stability. He reinforced the legions stationed along these frontiers, strengthening fortifications and ensuring that Rome's military presence was undeniable. Unlike some of his predecessors, he did not seek reckless territorial expansion but instead focused on securing existing borders, recognizing that maintaining order was more critical than overextending Roman resources. His policies in these regions helped prevent large-scale invasions and ensured that Rome remained dominant in northern Europe. While securing Rome's northern borders was vital, perhaps the most significant military event of Vespasian's reign was the final phase of the Jewish War. The conflict had begun in 66 CE as a large-scale revolt against Roman rule in Judea, fueled by political tensions, economic grievances, and religious differences. As a seasoned general, Vespasian had been tasked with suppressing the rebellion, and he had made significant progress before being recalled to Rome to assume the imperial throne. With his departure, the responsibility of crushing the remaining resistance fell to his son, Titus. The climax of the war came in 70 CE with the siege of Jerusalem. The city, a focal point of Jewish resistance, had become a fortress where the remaining rebels made their last stand. The siege lasted for months, during which the Roman legions systematically cut off the city's supply lines, starved its inhabitants, and launched relentless attacks against its fortifications. The conflict was brutal, with thousands of civilians caught in the crossfire. By the time the Romans breached the city's defenses, the destruction was near total. The Temple of Jerusalem, the most sacred site in Jewish tradition, was set ablaze and reduced to ruins. The loss of the temple marked not only the physical destruction of an important religious structure but also the symbolic end of Jewish resistance to Roman rule. Following the fall of Jerusalem, the remaining Jewish rebels either fled, were captured, or were killed. Rome's victory was decisive, but the consequences were far-reaching. A large portion of the Jewish population was forcibly dispersed, leading to what would later be known as the Jewish diaspora. Many were sold into slavery, while others resettled in different parts of the empire, unable to return to their homeland. This event fundamentally altered the history of the Jewish people, as they were now scattered across various regions without a centralized homeland. To commemorate the Roman victory, Vespasian and Titus commissioned the construction of the Arch of Titus, a monument that depicted the triumph over Judea. The arch, which still stands today, features detailed carvings showing Roman soldiers carrying spoils from the temple, including the sacred menorah. This monument was not only a testament to Rome's military might but also served as a reminder of the Flavian dynasty's role in securing the empire. It reinforced the idea that the Flavians had restored stability to Rome after the chaos of the civil wars, using military success as a foundation for their legitimacy. Beyond its immediate military and political impact, the Jewish war also had significant financial consequences. The vast wealth looted from Jerusalem was used to fund public works projects in Rome, including the construction of the Colosseum. This redistribution of resources further strengthened the Flavian dynasty, allowing Vespasian to invest in infrastructure while showcasing Rome's dominance over its conquered territories. Vespasian's approach to military affairs extended beyond individual campaigns. He sought to create a more sustainable and disciplined army. He implemented reforms that ensured Rome's legions were loyal to the emperor rather than individual generals, reducing the risk of internal uprisings. He also established policies that reinforced Rome's military presence in the provinces, preventing future rebellions and solidifying imperial control. His strategic focus on maintaining order, rather than reckless expansion, helped stabilize Rome after years of turmoil. His reign exemplified a shift in Rome's military priorities. While earlier emperors had pursued grand conquests, Vespasian recognized the importance of maintaining and fortifying existing borders. His policies in Britain and Germany ensured that Rome remained secure in the north, while the crushing of the Jewish revolt eliminated a major source of unrest in the east. By the time of his death, the Roman Empire was in a far stronger position than it had been during the chaotic years that preceded his rule. His emphasis on stability over expansion laid the groundwork for a more sustainable and disciplined approach to military governance, ensuring that Rome's dominance would endure for generations. Vespasian's final years were marked by careful preparation to ensure a smooth transition of power, a stark contrast to the chaotic successions that had plagued Rome before his reign. Having witnessed firsthand the dangers of political instability and civil war, he was determined to secure his dynasty's future by firmly establishing his eldest son, Titus, as his successor. This decision was unprecedented in Roman history. While emperors had previously been chosen through adoption or military force, Vespasian sought to create a hereditary dynasty that would provide stability after his death. His approach to succession was not merely a matter of appointing his son but of managing court politics, public expectations, and the military's allegiance. Titus had been groomed for leadership from an early age, serving alongside his father during the Jewish War and proving his capabilities as both a military commander and an administrator. His conquest of Jerusalem in 70 CE had won him great renown, and he was widely recognized as a competent and charismatic leader. However, despite his military achievements, there were concerns about how the Roman elite and the general populace would receive him. Rumors of his extravagance, his love for luxury, and his close association with the Jewish princess Berenice led to fears that he might rule in the style of Nero rather than his practical and disciplined father. Vespasian worked carefully to shape Titus's image, emphasizing his military prowess, loyalty to Rome, and administrative skill while downplaying any perceived excesses. Vespasian also ensured that his younger son, Domitian, was given a place within the imperial system, though he did not regard him as a suitable heir. While Domitian resented his secondary status, Vespasian's primary concern was securing an uncontested transition for Titus. To achieve this, he strengthened the loyalty of key military and political figures, rewarding those who had been instrumental in his rise to power and placing trusted allies in influential positions. He understood that the Senate, the Praetorian Guard, and the provincial governors needed to be aligned in support of Titus to prevent any power struggles after his death. By the time Vespasian's health began to decline, his legacy was firmly established. He had rebuilt Rome's economy, stabilized its borders, and restored confidence in the imperial office. Yet even in his final moments, his characteristic wit and pragmatism remained intact. According to historical accounts, as he felt the weight of death approaching, he famously remarked, "I think I'm becoming a god." This remark, a sardonic take on the Roman tradition of deifying emperors after their deaths, encapsulated his dry humor and realistic view of power. Unlike many of his predecessors, who had ruled with divine pretensions, Vespasian had always portrayed himself as a practical and down-to-earth leader. His last words served as both a joke and a reflection on the traditions of Roman rule. Despite his humor, his death marked a serious moment in Roman history. He passed away in 79 CE, and true to his nature, he insisted on maintaining dignity in his final moments. Rather than succumbing to weakness in bed, he reportedly struggled to stand, believing that an emperor should die on his feet. His passing marked the end of an era, but his legacy endured through the stability he had brought to Rome. The transition of power to Titus was smooth, a testament to the effectiveness of his planning. Rome, for the first time in decades, experienced an orderly succession without civil war or political upheaval. Vespasian's impact on the empire extended far beyond his own lifetime. His reign set a precedent for strong, pragmatic leadership and demonstrated that an emperor could rule effectively without excessive cruelty or extravagance. His economic reforms restored financial stability, his military policies secured the empire's frontiers, and his public works projects, including the construction of the Colosseum, left a lasting mark on Roman society. The Flavian dynasty, which he established, would continue under Titus and Domitian, shaping the future of the empire for years to come. Though his rule was sometimes overshadowed by the grandeur of later emperors, Vespasian's leadership was instrumental in stabilizing Rome after the chaos of the Year of the Four Emperors. His ability to balance military strength with political pragmatism allowed him to navigate the complexities of Roman power and leave behind an empire that was stronger than the one he had inherited. His reign demonstrated that Rome did not need an emperor who was born into nobility or one who ruled with divine pretensions. Rather, it needed a leader who understood governance, respected the military, and was willing to make practical decisions for the good of the state. The legacy of Vespasian was further cemented through his sons, though their reigns would take different trajectories. Titus, his chosen successor, ruled with moderation and gained popularity, while Domitian, who followed, embraced autocratic rule and was ultimately assassinated. Despite Domitian's downfall, the Flavian dynasty had already made a lasting impact on the empire. Vespasian's emphasis on stability and reform had set a model for future rulers, demonstrating that Rome thrived under practical and disciplined leadership. His death and deification also reflected a broader shift in Roman politics. While he had joked about becoming a god, the Senate officially deified him, recognizing his contributions to Rome and solidifying his place among the empire's honored rulers. This act was not merely symbolic. It reinforced the legitimacy of his dynasty and ensured that his memory would be preserved in Roman history. Temples and statues were dedicated to him, and his influence continued to be felt long after his passing. Vespasian's rise from modest origins to emperor was a remarkable story of perseverance, military skill, and political acumen. He had navigated the dangers of imperial politics, restored order to a fractured empire, and left behind a government that was stronger than before. His leadership proved that the empire could be ruled not through excess and indulgence but through careful governance, strategic decision-making, and a deep understanding of Rome's needs. Though he did not seek the glory of conquest or the adoration of the masses, his reign ultimately ensured that Rome remained stable and prosperous, securing his place as one of its most effective rulers. Vespasian's reign was a turning point in Roman history, bringing stability to an empire that had suffered through years of political turmoil, civil war, and economic instability. His leadership established the Flavian dynasty, setting a precedent for pragmatic governance and demonstrating that Rome could thrive under disciplined and competent rule rather than extravagant and erratic leadership. Unlike many of his predecessors, Vespasian did not come from an aristocratic background or have divine pretensions. Instead, he rose through military ranks, proving his worth through service and strategic acumen. His practical and results-driven approach to governance created a foundation that would influence Rome for decades to come. Before Vespasian came to power, Rome had suffered from the excesses of Nero, whose reign ended in disaster and led to the chaotic Year of the Four Emperors. This period of rapid succession and civil war nearly tore the empire apart, as rival generals vied for control. Vespasian's ability to emerge victorious in this crisis was not just a testament to his military strength but also his political wisdom. He carefully secured support from key regions, particularly in the east, and won over both the Senate and the military. Unlike his predecessors, who relied heavily on personal extravagance and court politics, he understood the importance of stability, economic reform, and military discipline in ensuring the survival of the empire. One of the defining characteristics of Vespasian's rule was his focus on economic recovery. When he took power, Rome was nearly bankrupt due to Nero's reckless spending. Vespasian introduced a series of financial reforms, increasing tax revenues through pragmatic policies such as the controversial urine tax, which taxed the collection of urine used for tanning and dyeing fabrics. While such policies were met with criticism, they reflected his no-nonsense attitude and willingness to make difficult but necessary decisions. His fiscal policies ensured that the empire could sustain its vast military and public works programs without falling into financial ruin. By the time of his death, Rome was in a much stronger economic position, with increased trade, improved agricultural production, and a restored treasury. His leadership style was also markedly different from many of the emperors who came before him. Where Nero had indulged in artistic pursuits and hedonistic excess, Vespasian presented himself as a humble, hard-working leader who prioritized governance over personal luxury. His humor and pragmatism made him a relatable figure among the Roman populace, and he was known for his direct manner and rejection of excessive grandeur. Unlike Caligula or Nero, who alienated the Senate and the elite, Vespasian worked to restore the authority of the Senate, ensuring that it played a meaningful role in governance. His ability to balance power between different factions allowed him to maintain control without resorting to excessive brutality. Militarily, Vespasian's reign was crucial in securing Rome's borders and maintaining stability. His greatest military achievement before becoming emperor was his command in the Jewish War, where he successfully quelled a rebellion in Judea. This campaign, later completed by his son Titus, demonstrated his strategic abilities and his understanding of the complexities of governing diverse provinces. As emperor, he reinforced Rome's frontiers, particularly in Germany and Britain, ensuring that the empire remained secure against external threats. His emphasis on strengthening the military while maintaining discipline helped prevent the kind of internal strife that had plagued the empire before his rule. One of Vespasian's most enduring legacies was his investment in public works and infrastructure. He understood that a strong Rome required not just military might but also a well-developed urban and economic infrastructure. Under his rule, numerous roads, aqueducts, and public buildings were constructed or restored. The most famous of these projects was the Colosseum, or Flavian Amphitheater, which became a symbol of Rome's power and cultural grandeur. Unlike Nero, who had built a massive private palace, the Domus Aurea, for his own pleasure, Vespasian redirected resources toward projects that benefited the public. His construction initiatives provided jobs, improved urban living conditions, and reinforced the idea that the emperor served the people rather than himself. Comparing Vespasian's rule to that of other Roman emperors highlights the uniqueness of his leadership. Unlike Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, Vespasian did not come to power through a carefully orchestrated political transition but through civil war. However, much like Augustus, he understood the importance of stability and worked to consolidate power without alienating key factions. Unlike emperors such as Tiberius or Domitian, who ruled through fear and suspicion, Vespasian maintained a more balanced approach, earning respect rather than ruling through terror. His ability to stabilize Rome without resorting to excessive purges or brutality set him apart from many of his successors. His leadership also stands in contrast to later emperors like Hadrian and Marcus Aurelius, who were known for their intellectual and philosophical pursuits. Vespasian was not a philosopher king. He was a soldier and administrator who focused on practical governance. While Marcus Aurelius spent much of his reign contemplating Stoic philosophy, Vespasian concerned himself with rebuilding Rome's economy, military, and infrastructure. However, both emperors shared a common goal: ensuring the longevity of the empire through disciplined leadership. Vespasian's reign was not without its challenges and criticisms. Some saw his taxation policies as excessive, and his handling of political dissent, while not as brutal as some of his predecessors, still involved suppressing opposition. His decision to establish a hereditary dynasty was also met with some resistance, as Rome had traditionally been wary of monarchy. However, the relatively smooth transition of power to his son Titus demonstrated that his approach to succession planning was effective. Ultimately, Vespasian's impact on Roman history was profound. He took an empire on the brink of collapse and restored it to stability. His reign demonstrated that Rome did not need an emperor who was born into privilege or who claimed divine status. Rather, it needed a leader who understood the complexities of governance and was willing to make difficult but necessary decisions. His emphasis on financial reform, military discipline, public works, and political stability set the foundation for the future of the empire. His legacy lived on through the Flavian dynasty, which continued under Titus and later Domitian. While Titus ruled briefly and was generally well regarded, Domitian's autocratic style eventually led to his assassination. However, even after the fall of the Flavian dynasty, the principles of governance that Vespasian established endured. Future emperors, particularly those of the Five Good Emperors period, would build upon his model of pragmatic and stable rule. In the grand scope of Roman history, Vespasian may not be as glorified as Augustus or as infamous as Nero, but his reign was one of the most crucial in ensuring the survival and prosperity of the empire. His ability to balance military strength with economic reform, his focus on practical governance over personal indulgence, and his commitment to stability over chaos made him one of Rome's most effective rulers. His life and leadership exemplify the idea that great leaders are not necessarily those who seek power for its own sake but those who take responsibility for the well-being of their people and their state.